For 10 years, the world's most powerful governments tried and failed to capture one man. Not because he was invisible, not because he was protected, but because he had built something no cartel, no spy agency, no criminal mastermind had ever created before. A parallel state. An underground empire with its own intelligence service, its own logistics network, its own surveillance grid, and its own rules. He controlled mountains, cities, borders, and politicians. He bought cops. He bought generals. He bought judges. He even bought the people hunting him. His name was Pablo Emilio Escobar. But this is not the story of a drug lord. It is the story of a manhunt, the most expensive, most chaotic, most politically explosive pursuit in modern history. A manhunt where almost nobody told the truth, where everyone, from the Colombian government to the CIA, had their own secret mission. A manhunt that ended with a single question. Did they catch Escobar, or did Escobar let himself be caught? Because by the end, nothing added up. Not the timeline, not the evidence, not the witnesses, and certainly not the body.
Before Escobar became a myth, he was a problem. An inconvenient, increasingly violent, increasingly expensive problem for both Colombia and the United States. But problems have solutions. Myths do not. The first task force assembled to hunt him down wasn't called a task force. It didn't even have a building. It was a collection of analysts, FBI tech specialists, NSA cryptographers, and Colombian investigators meeting secretly on a hill outside Bogota. They called it Cerro de los Espejos, the Hill of Mirrors, because the deeper they dug into Escobar's network, the more the lines blurred. Every address led to another address. Every informant was compromised. Every lead dead-ended into another lead. Escobar didn't run an organization. He ran a maze with no center. His hierarchy was fluid. His lieutenants rotated. His suppliers disappeared, and his safe houses changed every 48 hours. He never used the same car twice. He never slept in the same location for more than 2 nights. He never made a phone call longer than 30 seconds. And even those calls were layered, redirected, scrambled, bounced. Whenever the task force thought they had him, the intel dissolved. It wasn't wrong, it was outdated by exactly 1 step. Escobar wasn't running, he was leading, pulling the task force deeper and deeper into a labyrinth he designed years earlier. Nobody knew it yet, but they weren't hunting him. They were following him.
The first real break came from a mistake. Escobar didn't make it. The Americans did. While tapping rural phone lines near Medellin, NSA technicians found a frequency spike, an anomalous shortwave burst that repeated every few hours. It wasn't a phone call, it wasn't military, and it wasn't local. It was a pattern. 3 pulses, a pause. 2 pulses, a longer pause. Ghost frequency, they called it. To everyone else, it looked like noise. To one cryptographer, it looked like coordination. Someone was using low-frequency bursts as position markers. Someone on the move, someone avoiding traceable communications. Someone like Escobar. So the task force deployed mobile receivers across the Antioquia region. Each time the frequency pulsed, they triangulated. Each time they triangulated, the signal moved. Not randomly, but methodically. At first, they thought it was an escape route, then a delivery route, then a scouting pattern. It was none of those. It was a perimeter. The signal was drawing a circle around the Magdalena Valley. Escobar wasn't hiding inside the circle. He was guarding it. And whatever he was protecting wasn't money, wasn't weapons, wasn't territory. It was a base of operations
One the task force had never heard of, never seen, and never knew existed. A location that would become infamous. La Redoma.
What the task force found at La Redoma wasn't a cartel compound. It was a fortress. Hidden inside a valley carved by dynamite, surrounded by forests, disguised as farmland, fueled by hydroelectric generators buried under the hillside, staffed not by soldiers, but by engineers, mathematicians, and former military signal officers. Escobar had built his own intelligence agency, rooftop microwave relays, encrypted radio towers, mobile command trucks, a literal surveillance bunker buried under a machine shop, not to watch the police, not to watch his enemies, but to watch the task force hunting him. Every time the government deployed an operation, Escobar knew. Every shift change he knew. Every convoy, every helicopter, every agent rotation, he knew. Because he had built a system designed around one principle: don't outrun your enemies, out-observe them. They weren't hunting Escobar. He was predicting them. The task force wasn't closing in. It was dancing. And Escobar was calling the steps.
If you ask Colombian officials how Escobar survived so long, they'll tell you corruption, bribes, threats, fear, money. But none of that explains the precision. You don't evade two governments for a decade because you bribe a few officers. You do it because you bribe them strategically. Escobar's method was simple. He didn't bribe for protection. He bribed for tainted information. Not to stop raids, but to misdirect them. He paid for the wrong addresses, the wrong plates, the wrong safehouses. He paid corrupt officers to sabotage each other's intel, to compete, to contradict, to confuse. He didn't want the task force to stop searching. He wanted it to search in the wrong places. Escobar's greatest weapon wasn't violence, wasn't fear, wasn't money. It was noise. He created so much noise, so many false leads, fake sightings, staged events, that analysts spent more time filtering than finding. The paradox was simple. The more they hunted him, the harder he became to find. Not because he hid, because he orchestrated the hunt itself.
The first time they truly had him, physically, geographically, tactically, was August 1989. Through a combination of intercepted chatter and satellite imagery, the task force identified a remote hillside safehouse. Movement patterns matched Escobar's known habits. For the first time, there were no contradictions, no conflicting reports, no misdirection. It felt too clean, too perfect. But they didn't care. They mobilized. At 3:04 a.m., Colombian special forces stormed the hillside. They breached the structure, neutralized guards, secured the perimeter, room by room, door by door. But Escobar wasn't there. Instead, they found a radio transmitter repeating the same coded pattern every hour, the ghost frequency. Escobar hadn't used the frequency to communicate. He used it to bait the task force, to bring them to a location he had already abandoned, to waste time, to test response speed, to test tactics, to test deployment style. The raid wasn't a failure. It was a reconnaissance mission he designed, a live experiment, a test of how close they could get before he had to disappear again. He wasn't improvising, he was measuring.
In 1991, Escobar made a deal with the Colombian government. A surrender, a truce, a promise. In exchange for ending a bloody war, he would turn himself in. The catch? He would choose the prison.
and the guards, and the rules, and the perimeter, and the communications systems. They agreed. They called it La Catedral. To the government, it was a prison. To Escobar, it was the center of operations he always wanted. A fortress disguised as a surrender. A command center disguised as a punishment. From inside, Escobar managed shipments, negotiated alliances, signed off on contracts, approved assassinations. La Catedral wasn't a prison. It was a shield, a political shield, a legal shield, a physical shield. For the first time, the task force had no access, no surveillance, no informants. Escobar wasn't being contained. He was being protected. And he knew it.
Everything changed in 1992. Escobar ordered the torture and execution of 2 of his former associates inside La Catedral. Even his allies saw it as a mistake. The government, under pressure from the United States, attempted to transfer him to a real prison. But Escobar was 10 steps ahead. By the time special forces arrived, he was already gone. The perimeter guards had vanished. The sensors were offline. The security cameras had been looped. He didn't escape. He simply walked out and vanished into the mountains. The manhunt restarted, but this time everything was different. He wasn't protected. He wasn't shielded. He wasn't negotiating. This time, he was cornered, and that made him more dangerous than ever before. To understand the final stage of the manhunt, you have to understand the force that wasn't supposed to exist. Los Perros Negros, an unofficial, unacknowledged, unregistered paramilitary unit composed of former soldiers, ex-cartel members, retired intelligence officers, and at least 3 American contractors. No uniforms, no insignia, no accountability. Their mission was simple: end Escobar by any means necessary. They didn't chase leads. They didn't follow procedure. They didn't file reports. They hunted. And unlike the task force, they didn't have rules. They targeted informants, they burned safe houses, they eliminated lieutenants, they shut down supply lines, not to arrest Escobar, but to isolate him, to force him into the open, to shrink his world from a country, to a city, to a neighborhood, to a single block. They weren't tracking him, they were squeezing him. Every day, his network collapsed. Every hour, his circle shrank. Every minute, his resources drained. The man who once controlled a continent now controlled a handful of streets. And he knew it. December 2nd, 1993, Medellin. Escobar made a mistake. A small one, a simple one, a human one. He called his son, not for business, not for orders, just to talk. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he knew it was over. The call lasted too long. 1 minute, 2, 4. Enough time for American signal units to triangulate. Enough time for the task force to converge. Enough time for Los Perros Negros to move into position. When they reached the safe house, Escobar was gone. He escaped across the rooftops, barefoot, carrying a pistol and a small bag. The task force followed. They surrounded the block. They closed in. A brief gunfight, a body collapsed on a rooftop. A radio crackled. Objective down.
But here's where the story fractures. Witness accounts contradict each other. Ballistics don't match. The wounds don't align with the angles. The time of death varies, and the radio recording, the one confirming the kill, was never found. Some say Escobar was shot by the task force. Some say he shot himself. Some say Los Perros Negros killed him before the task force arrived. And some, quietly, carefully, without names, say the man on the roof wasn't Escobar at all, that he disappeared long before anyone reached the block, that he left Colombia through a corridor the CIA never disclosed, that the body on the roof belonged to a decoy. A theory? Yes. Impossible? Not entirely. Because in the months following Escobar's death, dozens of his former lieutenants reported receiving orders, phone calls, payments, instructions from someone using Escobar's codes and someone with access to his network.
So what happened? Did they catch Escobar? Did he escape? Did someone else end him? Nobody knows. Because the manhunt wasn't a manhunt. It was a war between governments, cartels, agencies, shadow groups, and political factions, each pursuing their own outcome. The Americans wanted a victory. The Colombian government wanted stability. Los Perros Negros wanted vengeance. And Escobar wanted an ending he could control. Maybe he got it, maybe he didn't. But the unanswered questions remain. Why was the final call never released? Why was the body buried so quickly? Why were the rooftop photographs sealed? Why were the ballistic reports edited? Why did witnesses change their stories? And why, decades later, do intelligence analysts still refer to the incident as the case without a body? Pablo Escobar wasn't a criminal. He was a strategist, a tactician, a manipulator, a man who weaponized information itself. He built a state within a state. He built a surveillance empire years before governments did. He built a manhunt he controlled from start to finish. And in the end, he may have built his own disappearance. Not because he wanted to escape the world, but because he wanted the world to never truly know what happened. A myth can't be captured. A ghost can't be buried. A legend can't be killed. And Pablo Escobar made sure, until the end, that he was all three.